Let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday, really early in the morning, which means we're here to talk about Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 4, The No-Win Scenario. I'm Scott, and with me is...
Emily.
And Blake.
It's cute to figure out which one's going to go first every time.
I was trying to give Emily space to go first this time.
It is International Women's Month, so we should probably let the lady go.
Lady?
There we go. So, as you can see in the bottom corner underneath me, spoiler alerts, we got the red alert icon going. So if you have not watched episode 4 of season 3, No-Win Scenario, and you don't want to get spoiled, this is not the video for you yet. Hit pause, go watch it, it's good, and move on. So let's go ahead and dive into our first impressions on this episode. Hey, Blake, what's your first impressions on this episode?
So, again, I really like this one. I think because one of our complaints with season 2 is we got bogged down with the 21st century stuff, right? You know, we spent a lot of time there to the point we really kind of like, okay, this could have been over several episodes ago. And we've talked about the pacing of season 3 so far with Picard, and I think this episode had a great flow to it. It picked up with where we left off last time with them in the nebula. It goes through, we find out it's not really a nebula, and, you know, they get out of there. They move the story on. So I thought it was a good story. I also really liked that we delve into where Will Riker's at with what's happened in his life, and we get that background on Captain Shaw that explains where he's at. So we really get into where these captains' experiences have led them to where they are and how they are.
Emily.
I thought this episode was really interesting. There's some really good one-liners in there. When Jack and Picard are talking, and he's like, "Let's talk about the elephant in the room, hair loss." I thought that was kind of a nice icebreaker for a really tense situation. And there were also scenes where I was just sitting there like, "What the fuck did I just see? Like, what is happening?" And I'm assuming most of you who have watched this will know exactly that scene is when she was lopping off the hand. So
There are a couple WTF scenes, that's for sure.
yeah, that was the one where I was just like, oh, what is going on here? And what is this bizarro tech that is happening? So yeah, it was really interesting. I enjoyed it.
So for me, I already got myself in trouble on this episode, and Blake knows this because I'm a name drop here. I was chatting with Terry Matalas last night at like midnight my time. Terry Matalas being the showrunner of Picard, and I said that this episode is the most Star Trek episode so far. And Matalas says, "What the heck do you mean? They're all Star Trek episodes." Like, no, that's not what I meant, Terry. That's not what I meant. I'm sorry.
So for those fans keeping track at home, we have a Babylon 5 podcast, the creator and executive producer of which has told Scott he is wrong.
Several
and
times.
Now we're talking Star Trek Picard, of which the executive producer and creator of season 3 has told Scott he is wrong. Does anybody else see a pattern here?
I want to point out that I'm right this time. And I've already told Terry he can come on and tell me how wrong I am. So we're working on that too.
Okay,
but
I would love to be there for that because yeah.
Yeah. So, but what I mean by it's the most Star Trek is it is an exploration internally and externally. A lot of quote unquote new Trek. And I will give Star Trek Discovery Season 3 and 4 and Strange New Worlds, I think, are more Star Trek-y than what the rest of the series has been. And I haven't watched Prodigy, so I may be oversteppy on that one. But what I'm getting at is you have character exploration, and then you also have exploration of, as Beverly Crusher points out, new life and new civilizations. And the idea that this nebula is not a nebula is something that was hinted at in episode 3. and actually episode 2 with the biological pulses, which obviously Beverly figures out are contractions. But it's just a new idea, and it's our characters realizing that they can solve a solution not by pew pew, although they can throw an asteroid at somebody, which is cool, but they can solve a problem by learning something new about their environment. That is extremely Star Trek, and it is the most Star Trek moment I think this show has had so far. And I think this is the strongest episode so far. It's also, to Blake's point, I'm happy that we've moved past this section of the story, and we even cap it off with an Admiral's log, which is cute. And we're able to move on to whatever's next, both with the Worf Rafi story, which we didn't get any of this week, but we'll be back to them. But now we're moving on and pushing this story forward with the Titan crew. We're done with the Nebula. We're moving on. I think other showrunners may have made that Nebula piece almost the entire season, but with these guys, they're really trying to push the story forward, which is great. Got a few folks in the chat. Good morning, David. And Lucky Bird Poop. Good morning, Lucky Bird Poop. I love the internet. So let's start chatting about the elephant in the room. And no, I'm not talking about Picard's hairline. Sorry, Emily. We talked about this. Yeah, it was a good line. We talked about this piece a lot when Blake and I did our live episodes 1 through 3 recap, because there was a lot of consternation online about Riker and Picard. And Riker must be a changeling, or he must be Thomas Riker or something, because Riker would never yell at Picard like that. So I want to hear from you guys how you feel the resolution was on that scene we had on the bridge in episode 3, and the resolution when Riker comes to talk to Picard soon after in episode 4.
I guess I didn't see it as that surprising, because one, this was like I mean, they've been in bad situations before, but this one hits a little bit differently because we know that Riker's been having, problems at home and is really struggling. So I didn't see that hostile exchange necessarily as surprising, giving all the context for it, where we're actually getting to see how their outside Starfleet lives impact their Starfleet lives. And I felt like that was a pretty good resolution. I think they both kind of realized this, things aren't what they used to be, which is exactly what it should be. Things aren't how they used to be. So I thought it was good.
Yeah, and I would agree with what Emily said, especially with Riker. And we talked to this a little bit. This is a person who's grieving, who's experienced a loss. And, while I don't have kids, I do know people who have lost kids. And no way do I know, what they felt like, but I have seen the changes in them after that happens. And you've got that line of dialogue from Riker as he talks about as they lower his son's casket into the ground, and there's nothing but darkness. And in all of our journeys out here, there's nothing that tells me there's anything more. This is someone that we're seeing lost in that grief of not knowing how to say goodbye, not knowing what's next. And I think that gets into Riker's actions. Riker wants to preserve every minute he can for people to get resolution and to spend time with each other and not risk losing anything else or anyone else. And, I think that definitely plays into the Riker character that we're seeing here. Again, as we said on our 1 through 3 recap, these are characters who have lived another 20 years since we saw them last. And we get to see that in how these characters act on the show and how it's influencing their behavior and judgments now.
Emily?
I mean, yeah, everything Blake said. I don't really have a whole lot more to add for that line.
I will completely agree, and this is what kind of frustrated me for the past week is I didn't expect the fan base to start wildly coming up with theories on why this happened, but I should have known.
Wait, hold on. You did not
I
expect the
know.
Star Trek fan base to come up
I
with
know.
wild theories. Where the hell have you been the last 2 decades?
But the point is, I thought it was written well enough, and I still do, to where they should have figured it out. And go ahead.
But it kind of makes sense because we're talking about characters from TNG, and when you had TNG, a lot of like the trauma and outside stuff they experienced didn't roll over most of the time.
That's
so
the
for
key.
something to actually roll over this time is, I guess, might be surprising, but to me, it's what I want to see. I want to see the character growth and how things that happen in previous episodes impact what they do now, because none of this actually happens like in little silos.
That is absolutely the key, and that's what I realized, and I'm glad you guys stepped on my point, but it's great. I appreciate it. Is I realized that I'm coming at this from somebody who, and Blake and I had this conversation too over the past couple episodes. I was never a fan of the Roddenberry type of writing. And what I mean by that is Gene Roddenberry felt that in the 24th and now the 25th century, we have moved past internal character conflict. Our characters are professionals. They should not be having fights with each other. They should be having external conflicts with other entities and other civilizations, but not the humans shouldn't be fighting each other. I was never a fan of that. I thought it was boring. I absolutely thought it was boring. It wasn't the way TOS was. But he had this crazy idea that, we're utopian, and it made it hard to write stories. So, which is why I gravitated towards DS9, because you had character conflict. So I think and actually I talked to one person on a Facebook group about this who flat out said, this isn't my Picard. This isn't my Riker, because the Roddenberry ideal is gone. These guys are fighting each other. So for some people, I can see this as a problem. And so they're going to try to find reasons as to why it's a problem. But for me, I just think it's excellent writing. And you guys hit on the points already. You have a father who has lost a son and who is losing, relationship-wise, his daughter and his wife. And his friend and his mentor and his father figure just found a son, but is refusing to even recognize that he has a son. And that's upsetting him. And then you've also got the fact that Shaw has given over command to Riker. Riker is now responsible for 500 souls, and his job is to get them home. And his job is to get himself home to his family. And so every time Picard wants to take an aggressive maneuver that he knows isn't going to work, Riker knows this. He knows how the Titan's built. He knows the weaponry. It's not going to work. He stops Picard from doing it. So... And I do love... I think Jonathan Frakes is getting more to chew on here than he did in all 7 seasons of TNG.
Absolutely.
His voice started cracking again when he was talking about his son in the coffin, which his voice cracked in the bar scene in episode 3. It's fun to watch these actors, who are really good actors, be able to actually play. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's been part of it, is the seeing that they're getting to do so much more. And I mean, not that they're getting to do much more, but they're getting to do it with more depth and range to their performance, I think, in this than what we've seen before. They're not just playing the same character reset each week or each movie. Mm-hmm. The exception to that is, and we've said this, and I will continue to say this, is they're using Gates McFadden as Dr. Crusher in this so much better than anything she got to do through any of the TNG movies, and arguably most of the series.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And she doesn't get much to do in this episode, but what she does is fun. She's the one that figures out what the hell's going on. And then her line where she says, let's do what we're good at. Yeah. Let's stop bickering at each other and do what we're freaking good at. I'm like, that is amazing. I love you, Beverly. You're awesome. So we've now discussed the Picard Riker piece. So let's talk about the other big character moment or moments in this episode, and that is with Seven. This is the most that Seven has gotten to do so far in this series in trying to track down the changeling. And we get one of the best DS9 references I have ever seen. Go find his bucket.
I like how they call it a residue.
Yeah.
I had to make a note of that because that struck me as kind of funny.
Shaw gets so many good lines in this. So many good lines.
And Scott and I have been teasing this for a while. You know, there was that reference in the previous episode where it was a friend of mine, a man of honor, told me this stuff. I think it was episode 2 where that came. Wasn't it 2 or 3?
It was episode 2.
And, you know, Worf says, a good friend, you know, a man of honor told me these things. And Scott and I at that point were like, oh, it's an Odo reference. When that pad came out and you had the bucket and the picture of Odo in the bottom corner, that kind of hit with this one. You know, we've been teasing that there was an Odo moment coming.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's another... I think there's another Odo moment coming too, but I'll be quiet. So we've got all that going, and I really do like how much that Jeri Ryan gets to play in this as well too, because she's been around and she's gotten quite a bit to do with both episodes or seasons 1 and 2. But I think it's just an interesting new place that she is at as a character, where she's dealing with so many different pieces as well too, and we'll see a lot more of this as the season goes on. But she's dealing with a captain who doesn't trust her. She's dealing with herself, trying to figure out, is this really where she wants to be and what she wants to do? But at the end of the day, she's got a job to do, and she's going to go do it. And this is the first of 2 points where I actually I felt that we needed some more explanation what's going on, and we will get it. And on this one, we don't get it yet. So I'll just call out what I call a plot hole, but I will say that I know it gets solved and actually explained later on down the road. And that is, if you're a DS9 fan, you know that we've had problems with changelings before. And they figured out in the 2-part episode where they go back to Earth, Paradise Lost, and I'm blanking on the second episode at the moment. But you can scan using phasers. You can scan for changelings. And they're not doing that here. She's going through and trying to find a different way to do it. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if you had watched Deep Space Nine, Jeri, you would know that you can just do a phaser sweep and figure this stuff out. But they will discuss that down the road too. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good and fun little piece that we get to see her moving around. And of course, it brings my favorite character back into the spotlight. And that is Captain frickin' Shaw, the dickhead. And I love it so much. Their banter is great. When he's trying to explain to her how to tell a changeling, and he's like, I was wrong about you. I think you're great captain material, which is what I would say if I was a changeling. And then Seven's like, or instead of just a dick.
Yeah. I also did love in that interchange when they were talking about the bucket. I did love the pot joke also.
Yeah. Find his pot. Oh, I'm sure the Roddenberry utopians are gonna have an issue with that one too. Like they haven't had pot before, or we don't have pot in the 25th century. But whatever.
But I think while we're on the subject of Shaw, do we want to jump and talk about that bit on the holodeck? Then we can circle back around to the holodeck working.
Yeah, that's my other plot hole that actually isn't a plot hole now because they're smart and the writers are smart. But yes, go ahead, Blake.
So, we've talked about that characters and understanding them a bit better. And when Shaw shows up in the holodeck and interrupts Picard and Jack having that discussion, we start to learn more about Shaw and his experience at the Battle of Wolf 359. And we've talked a lot about his dead naming of Seven and using Annika Hansen and Commander Hansen instead of Commander Seven. I think we really get some background. I'm not saying it excuses his behavior, but it gets into, we start to understand the experience he went through at Wolf 359. And, we've talked about the anger at Picard, and the only time we've seen that Next gen, this happened at Best of Both Worlds, and then we saw it followed up in Family, and then never again. But with DS9, that opening scene in Emissary, when you had Sisko just have that resentment and anger towards Picard. This gets back into that and explores that with Shaw and his overall anger towards Picard as Locutus and the Borg. This is someone who is deeply impacted and traumatized by that, and it still impacts them through this. We talk about that utopian idea of everybody's perfect and happy, but people still experience trauma and they still go through that, and it still impacts them. And I like that this explores that and the impacts on people. And we see that with Shaw in his interactions towards Picard in this. And I just think that was a great scene. And then that end line from it of, at some point, charm was replaced by asshole. Or asshole became a substitute for charm.
Yes. I need a t-shirt with that on it.
We need that for the whole crew on this podcast, Scott.
Hey, now.
I'm sure you can gift it to someone, Emily.
Right, because it would never apply to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Never.
I did appreciate that we finally got more of a background on Shaw and just how much it seems like he is struggling to hold it together. Because one, they're in a crap situation, and two, he doesn't trust Seven, and now he has Picard on his ship trying to take it over, and I feel like for him, that's got to bring back, like, I know he isn't Borg, but when he was Borg, he was using all this, and now he's on my ship and tried to, like, hijack it. Well, they did hijack it, basically, and all of that sort of inner conflict. And the interpersonal conflict is actually one of the reasons I preferred DS9, because it felt more real. And I thought TNG was good and it had great episodes, but it never felt realistic because, even in the future, we are going to have interpersonal conflict no matter how great things are, because everyone's personality is different. And even in TNG, where they didn't have these interpersonal conflicts, or like the internal conflict didn't roll over, bad things still happened. They still lost members of their crew, and it didn't feel right for that not to have a longer lasting impact. So I really appreciated this scene and how it did a really good job of bringing that together.
It's another reference, I think, not a really pointed reference, but a reference to another person who we know who was at Wolf 359 and had to deal with our good friend Locutus, and that is Sisko. And it's interesting to see how both of them handled the situation differently. Shaw has been holding this stuff in and being what I would say risk averse, not being somebody who wants to roll the dice, because the last time somebody rolled the dice, it caused a lot of people to die. And so he has been what I think is still a good captain, even though he's a dick. But he hasn't been able to kind of break out of this. Whereas in Sisko was able to much earlier on in his career. I think partially because Sisko still had Jake. If Shaw had a Jake, if Shaw had a family member or somebody to work with and latch onto and kind of work past this trauma, he'd be in a better place than he is now. So, and it's interesting to see that dynamic with this character.
Got to unleash the anger at Picard a lot sooner. Like, the anger was more fresh and it got released sooner, whereas it feels like Shaw hasn't had this opportunity to look at Picard and be like, this is what you did to me. Mm-hmm. It's been sitting there festering for many more years.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I am playing with my live chat right now because it's being stupid. But
I was about to ask if we had questions or comments we need to respond to.
Yeah, that's what I'm pulling up now. So Lucky Bird Poop, my favorite name on the internet,
said, great.
Like that it showed you didn't have to lose a family member to be traumatized by an event. Survivor guilt and PTSD is equally debilitating. I completely agree with that. Mm-hmm. And I think again, Todd Stashwick, who most of you, because it was for me, you're experiencing him for the first time. He has a lot to offer as an actor, and I think you're going to see that more as we go along. And I've been preaching to as many people as I can preach to, and I was actually telling Emily and Blake before we went live, you all need to go watch 12 Monkeys. It's a 4-season show on Hulu. It was on Sci-Fi Channel. Terry Matalas was the showrunner, and a lot of the people we're getting over here on Picard Season 3 came from 12 Monkeys. Todd Stashwick's Deacon is one of the best assholes on TV you will ever see. And it makes perfect sense to me now that I've watched it, that when Terry Matalas basically announced that Todd Stashwick was going to be playing Shaw, because actually they kept that quiet almost until the first episode, or actually at least until the last trailer that came out in January. He was saying that before they even cast Todd for the role, that they had in the script, in the writer's room, that his name was Captain Stashwick. Not that they were going to call him that, but they knew they were writing the character based around how Stashwick played Deacon. So if you want more Captain Shaw, 12 Monkeys is the answer. But I think this is just the most fun episode we've had so far. We've talked about it a little bit. Seven calling Shaw a dick. Shaw talking about pot. But I think the best one that there was where Shaw basically says, "I'm just a dick from Chicago." I was like, I love that one so much. But we then get to see Shaw be what I've been waiting for people to see since this show came out, because they've been dogging on my guy. And I understand why. He is an asshole, and he makes some pretty bad decisions in terms of dealing with Seven. But we get to see him actually be the hero. And, okay, I'm just a grease monkey, man. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to fix the nacelles. I'm going to O'Brien the shit out of this stuff, and I'm going to get it fixed. And I just love that. And then we also get the scene in that same point where the changeling decides to go mess with him as Crash LaForge, and that's fun as hell, too.
And I did like when the changeling walked in, because it's one of those things I've kind of, I don't want to say I've disliked it, but it's been a bit annoying, is they do tend to, with anytime she introduces it's, well, my father is this great engineer. You know, I do love that when they did it as the changeling, it kind of was the, I'm just covering to hope that you'll pick up that this is me and not changeling. So it worked there, but I hope they don't keep doing that.
Yeah, well, and I agree, and I think we'll be okay. She is the one who's given the kind of the lines that she has to kind of just throw out there. But I agree with you. I think we've had it now. We're done with it, and we haven't even had Geordi yet. And believe it or not, guys, Geordi is coming. I promise, he's coming. But and when he does,
Phrasing.
You're gonna like it.
Phrasing.
Oh, whatever.
We don't do that on this channel, Emily.
Sigh. I think I finally figured out my live chat. I've now got to where Lucky Bird Poops chat is not cut off. So Lucky says, it's the Billy Bob Thornton broke down good guy gone bad portrayal that makes Shaw so relatable. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And then Lucky says, it's the obvious humanity and vulnerability that make him art. Yes, Shaw is art. I agree.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen it. I think his whole, you know, asshole persona, and he kind of hit on it, is that's the persona he came up with to hide what he's feeling and what he's going through, because it's easier than letting people in.
Yes, absolutely. I have no idea what that is like at all.
No, neither one of us do.
I do not relate to Shaw in one bit at all. Not at all. Emily?
I'm just going to let that one sit there.
Do you have comments? So those in the chat.
How about we switch it up to Vatic?
Oh, yeah. We haven't even talked about the bad yet. And
Seriously?
Emily is, speaking of trauma and guilt about what you saw, tell me about how you feel about Vatic in this episode.
Okay, seriously, my note is, what the fuck did I just see? because what was that? And it made me really curious because prior to this, like, we never saw how changelings could really communicate outside the link.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we knew they did somehow, but there was not much discussion of it. So for that weird little dish, and then like the putting of the hand in it, and then it creates the space, I was just like, okay, that's terrifying. So thank you, nightmare fuel. Um, I was wondering if that's like how it's always been, or if this is a new technology that they have created to make the communication smoother and this new attempt at taking over the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. To Obviously we don't know for sure, but it is an interesting, I guess, cell phone call to the Great Link or the secondary Great Link or whatever. I do like that Vatic is scared of whomever this is or whatever this is. Because she's like, we're not going to go in the nebula. They're going to get crushed anyway. They're done. And what did the guy say? Failure to comply.
Yeah.
He's like, you're going to go get your ass down there and you're going to go get them because we need the asset. We don't know what the asset is yet. I mean, I think we can all have a kind of a good idea based on who's going crazy in the ship, but they're looking for the asset.
Well, and we know who the asset is based on who's been chased since the beginning of the series, but we don't really fully understand why.
And
I'm
Lucky,
gonna shut up here because I can say something, but I won't.
No, you can't. No,
I know.
No bueno. Look at this. Okay. I'm still working on the chat, guys. It's coming. I think what it is Lucky Bird is saying too much stuff, and it's making it too big. No, that's not true. But Lucky
Jeez,
Bird
Scott,
poops.
tell our watchers to shut up. Why don't you?
No,
Thanks.
I'm not, because I actually like what Lucky has to say, and this is the first time Lucky's interacted. So her face when she realized she was entirely expendable was played beautifully by Plummer. I agree.
Yeah.
Plummer is not. Oh, go ahead.
Phenomenal, just throughout.
I still say watch some of the videos that they've been putting out with the Ready Room, kind of the Will Wheaton after show that they're doing, because they've had snippets of interviews with Amanda Plummer, and even watching her in those interviews that she's doing about the character and about the show she's just coming the same way almost, and she's in character almost even in those, and it's just creepy, and she's phenomenal at it.
She just has fun. She's definitely a thespian. But to Lucky's point, we learned something about Vatic here. One, that at least her hand is a changeling, if not all of her. At least her hand is. But we also learned that Vatic was not here as, an independent person bent on revenge. And we also learned that Vatic isn't here to be a kamikaze either. She does not want to be somebody who is just bossed around, because she gets that look like, okay, now you think I'm expendable. I don't like this too much. But then she's also scared. She absolutely is scared of whatever it is that she was talking to, be it the Great Link or a different entity or whatever. She was scared because at the end of the day, she did what it told her to do, even though she knew it was not the right move for her or her crew. So we get a lot of little bits of information about Vatic in just that one scene. And of course, at the end of the episode, we leave her stuck in the nebula herself. So, oopsie.
Because Riker threw an asteroid at her.
Damn right I did.
I love that line.
Jonathan Frakes, man.
Right, I did.
Jonathan Frakes is a treasure. I mean, I've always known this, but man, he is proving it. And also, this is the second episode that he directed for the season as well, too. He directed episodes 3 and episode 4. So, and he's having fun.
And I will say that probably that line was one of my two favorite in Star Trek. My other one, and for people that comment on swearing in the new Star Trek, one of my favorite lines comes from Star Trek Generations. And you've just got Data sitting there. Oh, oh shit. Yeah, Riker following up with "goddamn right I did" is right up there for me with Data going, oh shit.
And we do get the quintessential, or the obligatory, I guess is the right term, the obligatory F-bomb in Star Trek Picard. But I think it's earned this time.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike pure fucking hubris from the Admiral in season 1. When Picard says it, it's, he's trying to relay emotion and where he's at in his thoughts. And I think it's earned. Which that whole scene, we talked about in the holodeck, between Jack and Picard is really good. I like the fact that they're on level playing ground. Actually, Patrick Stewart sits in the chair to talk to him. But we also learn more about Jack as well, too, because we heard in episode 3 that Beverly did say, hey, your dad is Jean-Luc Picard. You should go talk to him. And she says he didn't. Well, we find out he actually did.
Yeah.
But he, in his mind, thought that Picard didn't need him. And that's a very intriguing piece to this puzzle that we're getting here, too, that Jack actually did seek out his dad, but then felt inadequate because he wasn't the Starfleet family. What do you guys think about that?
Well, just to touch on that scene, that revelation at the end, this show does unspoken scenes so well. And I will again give it to Patrick Stewart, but also Ed Speleers in that moment. I mean,
yes.
You just have that look between them. This show's doing so well in the writing and in the acting, where scenes don't need to have the dialogue to understand what's being communicated.
Yes, trust your actors.
Because that look of pain on both of their faces with that revelation was just fantastically done.
Brew in the chat, and I didn't hear this, Brew, so that's interesting. Stewart ad-libbed that line with the F word, and they kept it in the final cut. Well, good old Sir Patrick Stewart has a little bit of a potty mouth. It's fine by me.
Yeah, I liked that scene. I thought how they did that revelation was done really well. Mm-hmm. And just for both. Because, I mean, Jack obviously knew he was there. He knew who he was. Mm-hmm. But for Picard to realize he did confine me, and I said that to him without a clue that I might have had a son out there. And now he's been carrying this around for years.
And, I mean, I count myself very lucky. I don't come from a quote unquote broken family, but I have a family member who doesn't know who his father is. And his mom unfortunately passed away, and he will never know. And I have had several conversations with him over the years of how that is just painful to him. Mm-hmm. That it's the unknowing.
Yeah.
And just not being able to know it all. I mean, is he even out there still? I don't know. And so you look at Jack at the bar, who's made that first step and said, okay, I'm going to go find him. And then what he hears is, my dad doesn't need me. So I've spent my entire life wondering who my dad is. And now I find out, and he's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. But just based on what he's seen, he thinks his dad doesn't need him. That's got to be almost as gut-crushing as not knowing who he is to begin with.
Well, and because I have a family member in a very similar situation of, they don't know who their father is. And you're right on that part, because in the way it's manifested with my family member is their father doesn't want them or need them. And the effects that has had in their personal life and their relationships and how they get along with things, because they very much have that, of feeling not needed, not wanted as part of their father's life. And that definitely messes with them.
And, as a dad, I just don't get it. I know it happens. And I'm just naive to it, but I'm more of the, much like the scene we got in the last episode, the 17 seconds when you realize you're a father, or I always go back to the West Wing, is when Toby is concerned that if he's going to be a good dad or not, and Leo just says, as soon as you see your kids, you're fine, you're set, you're gonna be fine. Or no, it was the president who said that. So Lucky also says to that point. And Jack heard the answer that mirrors exactly the reasoning behind Beverly's choice not to involve Picard in Jack's life. And that is Starfleet will always be Picard's first best destiny, to quote Spock. Mm-hmm. And so he hears that and walks away. And then David asks on the F-bomb, has Patrick Stewart been hanging out with Jessi too much?
It's possible.
It's possible.
Highly possible. Although with the holodeck scene, can I also comment? I'm so glad that Jameson survives to the 25th century.
Well, did you like Jack's order? Just give me some cheap whiskey with ice.
Yeah, just cheap whiskey on the rocks. I'm not really a wine person. Now that I could relate with. Just put the whiskey in the glass.
So
well, not the cheap part, but the whiskey on the rocks part I can relate to.
So Lucky says, because bottom line, Picard could have chosen marriage, children, family life, prior to even knowing Jack existed. And by the way, Lucky, you do see I actually finally fixed it. You're not cut off this time. So yes, it only took me the entire show to fix it. Prior to even knowing that Jack existed, Picard spent an entire existence believing he didn't really need anyone. And that's interesting that now we're seeing in Picard's quote-unquote twilight that he is realizing there's more to this. That's the one theme that I think is actually rung true in all of the show, season 1, 2, and 3, is Picard realizing that there is more to life and more to family than what he thought there was. He got that with Soji in season 1. He got that learning about his father and realizing his father wasn't what he thought he was in season 2. And also with Q. And now he's realizing it with Jack. The Miss Pal family says Picard could have had a family with somebody else. Yeah, he could have, but he never wanted to. That's the thing. And that's what Picard said in last episode. And actually, he's what he said in Generations.
Yeah, because in Generations, when he had that scene in his quarters after he got the call about his brother and nephew, was he took comfort in knowing the family line would live on through Renee, that he didn't have to do that.
Yeah, because it was never his thing. He never wanted that. Or at least he didn't think he wanted that. Because, and as we learn in Picard, season 2, it's because he was afraid he would become his father. He was afraid that he would be the person who is physically and emotionally abusive. And he didn't want he didn't want to become that monster. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and David says, but he has had a relationship with Beverly, not necessarily romantic, for a really long time. Well, hell, even Picard says in this season, they were on and off again at least 5 times. When we saw several of those, one of my other great Jonathan Frakes Riker lines was from the last episode. I was watching you get cooked up for 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and that comment actually led me to question their ages.
Yeah, which we actually get the answer here.
How old they're supposed to be right now, how old is Jack exactly, and the likelihood of a pregnancy given the age range.
So are we back to asking the question, does Picard wear a rubber? We asked this question last episode, Emily, and we're back to it now again.
No, because
I'm pretty sure we've cured ED in the 24th century.
So, because Jack would be about 23, 24.
Which is called out in this episode.
Yeah, which is called out in this episode.
And how old is Beverly supposed to be?
In her 70s, I think. And Picard's 91, 92.
So that would have put her close to 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering the likelihood.
Well, I mean, I am definitely not a biologist. But if we assume that life expectancy continues to get longer over the next 300 years, I would assume that would mean that the
fertility would.
Yeah, I would just say. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I am definitely out of my element here. I have a degree in history, but I'm just going to, in my headcanon, say, okay, as we become more healthy individuals, that people can bear children into later parts of their life. And of course, the other option would be that, medical advances allow it, but I don't think that's the case because obviously it doesn't seem like Beverly was trying to get pregnant. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, and that just those questions have led to some interesting questions about Jack himself. But I'll save that for next episode.
Miss Powell Family says Janet Jackson, who I know Emily is a big fan of, had a baby in her 50s, and Jimmy Doohan has a child in his 70s.
And I know it can happen. It's just statistically not as common. So, I mean, that's just really my question of how much has the statistics of human biology altered.
And Brew1701 says, FYI, the changeling interrogated by Worf and Rafi in the last episode was played one of Picard's kids in The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Actually,
Thomas Dekker.
Yeah, it played the kid in Generations, but he also played another kid in another TNG episode earlier on, and I'm blanking what the kid's name was. But so Thomas Decker's been in Star Trek, specifically TNG shows, 3 times now. So we've talked about these scenes in the holodeck, and Blake alluded to it, but this is the one piece that I alluded to when we did our full 6-episode non-spoiler review. And that is, I love that Terry Matalas and the writers are nerds and that they know what we're going to come back at them on. And so when I was watching this episode about a month ago for the first time, I immediately was like, okay, Riker just said, divert all unnecessary power to life support and start putting everyone in common areas and shut everything else down. And then Picard and Jack walk into a holodeck and it's working fine. And immediately I was like, God, no, you did it. This is your first screw up, Terry. You screwed up. And then no, he's like, no, hold on. Hold my beer. 30 seconds later, not 30 seconds later, Picard's like, oh yeah, we have an emergency battery just to keep the crew sane when they were having problems like this. I'm like, holy shit. I love you. You know how to write scripts. This is amazing.
Problem and explanation.
Yeah, and it's not the first time they've done it. Again, it's the same thing I've been saying about the nostalgia piece, is that there is nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia, but then there's nostalgia that moves the plot around. And we are getting nostalgia that moves the plot, and that's really, really good. Let's see here. We got some more stuff in the chat. Let's see. Actually, we can... Yeah, we'll keep those there for now. But let's go ahead, folks, because we're moving into the end of this hour. Let's talk about predictions about what we think is going to come next. And again, Blake and I have seen through episode 6. Emily has seen through episode 5, and she's going to watch episode 6 just as soon as we leave here. So we really can't do much predicting because we know what happens next. But you in the chat, give us your predictions. What do you think is going to happen with this crew of the Titan? And then also, what's going to happen with Worf and Rafi, who we did not see this week? I've seen some stuff online. A couple of the fan theories that did not pan out. I mean, we've already kind of joked about the Riker as a changeling. But a lot of people thought that Geordi was going to fly into the rescue in the Nebula and save the day. That didn't happen. A lot of people actually thought the Nebula was the Great Link. And that was actually an interesting one I saw, was that the Nebula is giving off biological pulses because it was a makeshift secondary Great Link for this faction that we've heard about. But of course, that wasn't the case either.
On the Nebula real quick. I loved at the end, if you noticed after, the Nebula gave birth, how similar those creatures were to the encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah, it was the babies. It was the babies.
Yeah, little baby. Maybe not the same species, but it definitely had that callback and similarity to the Farpoint creatures.
Little space jellyfish. So have you... we have, let's see. Riker addressed the most important issue as it appears there has been an upgrade in quarters. No more bunk beds. Well, but there are bunk beds because he got stuck in them. So again, those in the chat, give us your predictions. We want your predictions. Have you, Emily and Blake, have you all seen any other predictions that have been fun so far?
I haven't really read too much yet because I've had other stuff, but no, I don't think I've seen anything that was particularly like outlandish or super interesting. I've seen some comments here and there, but not a whole lot of predictions yet.
So David says, I can't find your podcast on my phone podcast, only on YouTube. And David, you can find us at anchor.fm. So, and I misspelled that. So let's try that again with, actual spelling it correctly. Anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast. So you can find the audio version of our podcast, which is mainly Babylon 5, at anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast. And when you go there, it will give you the links to Spotify, Stitcher, Audible, Apple, Podchaser. I mean, any app you want to throw at, the links are all there at anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast.
Well, as far as predictions, most of the ones I've seen ever since last week, all the predictions are now who's a changeling and who's not. So that's been kind of the fun part, is watching, all the predictions of who's a changeling, who's not. They're even picking apart. I think the one I saw this morning was they took one of the posters that they did, the posters that came out before the show, and we're showing it with a screenshot of Riker and going, see, he looks different in this picture. Yeah. This is proof that one's a changeling. I'm like, no, you dumbass, one's been airbrushed. I mean, like, you're showing an airbrushed art poster and trying to make the argument that this is proof of changeling. That one.
Well, the changeling question, at least that I had, was whatever species is on the Shrike with Vatic, are they also changelings?
They are, because they're making the same clicking noises that the changeling did on the Titan. When the changeling shot the other officer, it was making that same clicking sound when
I know they can mimic, so I was trying to figure out, are they all changelings on that ship, or is that an actual species and some changelings are mimicking them?
I did see one theory out there that said that they're a new version of the Jem'Hadar serving the new group of changelings. I did see that one.
That'd be cool too.
Oh, that would be,
because these changelings who were cut off from the Great Link wouldn't have access to the Jem'Hadar anymore, so they'd have to clone their own. But I still think with that clicking sound, that kind of gives it away.
We'll see.
So the one thing. Oh, go ahead, Emily. Sorry.
I'm not disagreeing that they are changelings. It's just it'll be interesting to find out.
I'm sure we will find out. One thing we didn't talk about, guys, and that's where the predictions are coming in the chat, is what the hell is up with Jack? And again, those who have watched a few more episodes kind of have an idea, so we can't say much. But I will put your predictions in the chat, and I will try to keep a poker face. Miss Pal Family says, is Jack seeing things because he has Borg nanites? Did he get attached to an alien during a mission? Okay, and then we have another one. Jack is a sleeper changeling, or some measure of catalyst, which completes them in some way. And then, of course, with everyone being a changeling, I think Deanna is the changeling. We've only seen her over subspace where Riker wouldn't sense her with his Imzadi sense, his secret Imzadi sense. And then Lucky says, having not watched DS9, I'm assuming the answers are behind the red vision door. See, that's the thing, and I actually turned on my subtitles this time when watching this episode. I couldn't do that the last time because I was watching a screener. And there are several different voices in the subtitles. It doesn't say anybody by name, but the key thing is, find me is said several times. And then the last thing that is said by a male voice, which almost sounds like the same floaty head guy, is, we will be together soon. We will be together soon. So that is what's said to Jack in his vision. And yes, we've seen it a couple times now with the red door and the red vines. So we'll see what happens there. But there's absolutely something going on with Jack, and it ain't good. And Jack doesn't think it's good either because he's scared to death in that. Again, we were talking about how good of an actor Spieler is. When he's looking in the mirror, the fright and the terror and just the trepidation on his face is amazing. David says, is it Cisco? I certainly hope so. I want Avery Brooks back. I do.
They need to do a Cisco.
Star Trek Cisco, the spinoff from Star Trek Picard. I am 100% in. And then Miss Powell Family says, I'm sorry, Emily, I keep stepping on you.
I want a Worf series, and I want a Cisco series. I want to follow them.
And then Pal asks, is it the Prophets? Which again is another DS9 reference. We don't know. We'll find out. We still have 6 episodes to go. And as we've said, we have heard, because I haven't seen them yet, Terry Metalis, I haven't seen them yet. You should hook me up. We have heard that episodes 9 and 10 are the TNG movie we have been waiting for. Everything is built up to episodes 9 and 10, which is a movie. And we also heard from Stephen Barton, who's the composer, and we interviewed him, and you should check out that interview if you haven't, that episode 10, he believes, is going to clock in at 120 minutes. So
speaking of interviews, Scott.
Yes, we want to...
Are we announcing what we're doing later today?
No, I think we should break the seal. So, today, and we won't release today because I got to edit and make it pretty, but soon, probably either Friday or Saturday, we will be releasing our interview, which we're going to do 4 hours in the future here, with the man, the myth, the legend, the hero the dipshit from Chicago, the hero we need, and the hero we deserve. We will be interviewing Mr. Todd Stashwick later today and talking to him about Captain Shaw and probably Deacon. So be looking for that coming out here probably Friday or Saturday once I get to edit it. And if you are not subscribed to us, make sure you click that subscribe button, that like button, and click that notify bell, because we go live a lot, as you can see. And the only way to know that we are live is to click that notify button so you get pushed notifications as soon as we do go live, so you can join the chat here as well. A couple more things in the chat is David says, I'm having to thank either Prophets or Paw Wraiths. As much as a Deep Space Nine fan as I am, if we never hear about the Paw Wraiths ever again, I'll be okay with that. I think that was the weakest part of DS9.
Yeah, but that's an interesting idea. That's interesting.
Lucky also says the last Jack that was called out during the vision was Beverly Crusher's voice. And Miss Powell says, a man called Cisco likes Brooks' old show, A Man Called Hawk. I go back to one of the... I'm a big fan of Avery Brooks. I think he's an amazing actor. I think he has been shortchanged over the years, and it's disappointing he didn't get to do much more with his career after DS9. But he's the reason why we know Cisco will return. And I continue to point that out every time I can, is the writers didn't have that in there. The writers had Cisco goes off of the Prophets, the end, story over. And Avery Brooks said, you are not going to have me as a father leave my child and my unborn child for good. And so they wrote in the scene where he goes back to Jennifer's his former wife. He goes back and says, I'll be back. I don't know when. Maybe yesterday, maybe tomorrow, but I'll be back. So Cisco must come back. Ah, David, I thought the hero you need is a decent first baseman for the Cubs. David? David?
Well, that track record of respecting the fans and the followers of the show just went out the window. Way to go, Scott.
I know David subscribed. He hit the notify button. I know, he's fine. And Lucky agrees. That hurts, David. That hurts. Hey, you know what? I actually think this season's going to be pretty good. Look out, Cardinals. Here we come. Yeah, and David says, yeah, exactly. Brooks demanded that scene, and well on him that he demanded it. Okay, we're going to go ahead.
Part of it that Brooks added, I mean, you mentioned that scene because one of the things he said is, he felt the weight, and, far be it for the three of us to discuss this particular issue, but, he said as an African-American man, the portrayal he had that he was not going to do that way. And he did that several times throughout the series. His relationship with Jake, the way he portrayed, insisted that the relationship he had with his son be portrayed throughout that series. So it wasn't just that end scene. I mean, there were points throughout that Brooks said, and even Sirach Lofton has said, even outside of the show, the relationship they had and the bond that they had was incredible. Apparently, I guess Brooks would take him and introduce him as one of his sons, and would take him to different events and stuff. So, the way Brooks portrayed Cisco from the start, he knew the weight of what was there.
Yep. Well, what we need to have is Miles O'Brien return. We need to have Avery Brooks return as Cisco. Cassidy Yates, the actor who plays Cassidy Yates, is on the Orville, so she's still working. And Sarah Lofton as Jake looks like a young Ben Cisco now, so let's get it all done. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up, folks. Emily, you have anything you want to add before we close it down?
No, I think we covered most of it. So
we've done enough damage for one day.
Watch episode 6 after we're done.
Blake, you have anything you want to add?
Nope, I think we're good.
Well, folks, we will be back here next week to talk The Imposter, episode 5, which, by the way, is another really good episode. Prepare yourselves. Oh, my God. May want to get some tissues for this one, folks. Just going to say it right now. May want to get some tissues. And also, be sure again to subscribe and notify, because that Todd Stashwick, Captain Shaw himself, interview will be dropping here very, very soon. So until next week, I've been Scott, and with me has been
Emily
and Blake.
And let's boldly get the hell out of here.